Mom hated me for not being a girl, so she abandoned me when I was 6. Now I'm successful, she demand I pay college tuition for her golden kids. I always felt like my mother hated me. Honestly, she could never really handle raising 3 kids. On top of that, she resented me for not being a girl. When I was born and she found out I was a boy, she screamed at the doctors, begging them to tell her there had been some kind of mistake. Since she couldn't have another girl, she decided to make me look like one, which caused me a lot of harm and ridicule every year at school. For as long as I can remember, my mom dressed me in girls' clothing. She wouldn't let me have any boy toys, only dolls and Barbies. I hated every second of living with my parents. I tried to do all my work at school and managed to get straight A's. But when my younger twin sisters brought home their report cards with C's and D's, they were treated to whatever they wanted for dinner. It didn't matter how expensive the restaurant was. They got to go. Do you think I got to go with them? No. I had to stay home and look after our dog. One year, when I was in 1st grade, about 6 years old, my mom bought my sisters some new clothes for school. They cost over $200. I was so upset that I ripped the clothes to pieces, cutting them up. When my mom walked in and saw what I was doing, she started screaming at me, yelling that I was ungrateful and that I would have to pay her back every penny she spent on those clothes. Then she stormed into my room and started throwing all my clothes, toys, and belongings into a suitcase. I asked her, "What are you doing?" She just ignored me. The next thing I knew, she was screaming at me to get in the car. So I did, waiting to see where we were going. To my surprise, she took me to my aunt's house. She told me to get out, grabbed my suitcase, and walked up to the front door, ringing the doorbell. Then she sped away, leaving me standing there all alone. I was terrified, but also a little relieved. My aunt opened the door and found me standing there, tears in my eyes, but a small smile on my face. She was shocked to see me. She welcomed me inside and led me to the back of the house. We passed through the living room, which was small, well, I guess average-sized, with a desk and chair in the main room. She told me this was her office, but she could blow up a mattress so I could stay there for the night. I laid awake in bed for hours while my aunt kept calling my mom over and over. She and my uncle tried to be quiet as they talked about me and why I was there, trying to make sense of everything. I think my aunt was so shocked that I was just left alone on her doorstep that she forgot to even ask me why I had been dropped off without any warning. I couldn't stop thinking about how much I hated my twin sisters. It's not my fault I'm a boy, and I definitely don't want to be a girl. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and chocolate chip pancakes. I had never had breakfast made for me at home, so I figured those pancakes and bacon were just for them, not for me. So I didn't even get out of bed. I just laid there, listening to my stomach growl, telling me it was starving. "Shut up," I whispered to my stomach. To my surprise, there was a knock on the door. My Uncle Gary stood there in his work clothes. He asked me if I was going to sleep in or if I wanted a hot breakfast. Either way, he said it was fine. They'd just save me a plate and stick it in the microwave. Honestly, I was shocked. They made breakfast for me? I told him I'd get up now and come eat. At 6 years old, breakfast at home usually meant a cold Pop-Tart or cereal with barely any milk. Sometimes it was just a banana, but I had never seen anything like the meal they set in front of me. They even had orange juice, my favorite, though my mom never bought it because I was the only one who liked it. But my sister Lily liked pepperoni Hot Pockets, and she got them all the time. I sighed, then loaded my plate with as much food as it could hold and started eating. My Aunt Lucy and Uncle Gary looked a little surprised at how much and how fast I was eating. Lucy even told me to slow down so I wouldn't choke, but I didn't care. I had never had food this good or this much of it. I always got the leftover parts of the meals my mom made because she would make my plate last and make sure my twin sisters got the most. My Aunt Lucy really became like a second mom to me, and my Uncle Gary was like a father. I was really happy just being there. They even went out and bought me clothes I liked. So now I had band t-shirts, jeans that weren't skinny jeans, and the best part, a regular pair of Nikes. I was never bullied at school again after being left with my aunt and uncle. Then when I was 21, I celebrated with my little family and a few friends. I didn't drink much. I just didn't see the point in it, but I still had a lot of fun. By the end of the night, my Uncle Gary was feeling a bit too good. After all, he had drunk an entire bottle of vodka by himself. As the night wound down, I noticed something was wrong. Uncle Gary just didn't look right to me, so I told my Aunt Lucy that we needed to call an ambulance just to be sure he was okay. My aunt called emergency services, and then we waited anxiously for them to arrive. Before they got there, Uncle Gary ended up throwing up all over himself, so we had to quickly turn him on his side and clear his mouth so he wouldn't choke. The ambulance finally showed up, and the paramedics told us it was likely he had alcohol poisoning and needed to be rushed to the hospital. My aunt was beside herself with worry, but I managed to calm her down. We followed the ambulance to the hospital, praying the whole way. When we got there, they took us to one of those small rooms where family members are brought when their loved ones don't make it. Inside those 4 small white walls, we were told that my Uncle Gary had passed away in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I held my Aunt Lucy, the only real mother figure in my life, while she wept bitterly for what felt like hours. The doctor came in and asked if we wanted to see the body. My aunt said yes, but only if I would go with her. I agreed, and we walked hand in hand to the morgue section of the hospital. They led us through huge metal doors into a cold room where there was a bed directly in front of us, covered by a clean white sheet. You could clearly see the shape of my uncle's body underneath. He was more than an uncle to me. He was like a father. Whenever I wanted something special, like a kite or a bow and arrow, instead of just buying it for me, he would take me to get it and teach me how to use it. That's how we became so close. My legs were shaking, and I could barely breathe as we got closer to that bed. When we were right in front of it, the doctor asked if we were sure we wanted to see him. My aunt and I both nodded, yes. He slowly pulled back the top part of the sheet, revealing my Uncle Gary's head. He looked pale and purplish. My aunt touched his cheek and told him how much she loved him and that she didn't know how she would live without him. When she finished, it was my turn to say goodbye. I had a lump in my throat, and tears were about to spill over at any second. So I quickly looked up at the bright lights to keep myself from crying, a trick I learned from my school counselor when I was being bullied. Then I looked back down at my uncle and told him I loved him, that he was my real father no matter what anyone said, and that I would never forget all the fun projects we worked on together over the past 15 years. The doctor covered his body again, and we made our way back to the hospital lobby, and then, well, we went back home. The next day, we made funeral arrangements, and many family members showed up to pay their respects. I had to stand right next to my uncle's head at the casket, which made me feel a little uneasy. After about 4 or 5 hours, he was buried, and we were in the car driving home. As we pulled into the driveway, my Aunt Lucy stopped the car and looked at me very intently. "What is it?" I asked her, scared that she might kick me out just like my parents had. There was a look in her eyes, but I couldn't quite understand it. She reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope, carefully opened it, and handed it to me. It was my Uncle Gary's will. I was so shocked that I choked when I tried to protest, telling her that she should get all the money. Uncle Gary had left everything to me. She disagreed and said that he wanted me to have it, so I could take the money and take over the business I had been working at so steadily. I felt blessed, yet guilty, because here I was, with a fortune. As I kept reading the documents, I found out that she and Uncle Gary had invested in very promising stocks. One of those stocks was Apple, and the other was Microsoft. I begged my aunt to take at least half of the money, but she looked at me and said she wouldn't touch it. I even put some of the money in envelopes and hid them around the house in places she would eventually find. After I moved out and was on my own, no matter where I hid the money, she would always find it, and it would end up back on my desk in my bedroom while I was sleeping or at work. That's when I decided I would sell half of the stocks and use that money to build a business. My dream growing up was to have a chain of my own restaurants. While living with my Aunt Lucy and Uncle Gary these past 15 years, Aunt Lucy taught me how to cook just about anything and everything from scratch. So I know I can cook, and I can hire people who are also great cooks. A restaurant owner was planning to put his place up for sale soon, and I wasn't going to let it go without a fight. I just knew I could use the inheritance money to transform that old restaurant into something people would flock to. To my surprise and luck, and maybe with my uncle, well, Dad, looking over me from heaven, I made all the right choices and said all the right things while negotiating for the restaurant. I spent the next year renovating the entire place, including the kitchen. I bought new furniture, tables, utensils, appliances, stoves, and more. I even painted the walls with my Uncle Gary's favorite color, blue. But not just any blue, the deep, dark blue you see when you first look at the ocean. As time passed, the success of my restaurants grew. Soon, my third restaurant was about to open in Houston. My Aunt Lucy kept telling me how proud she was of me. My twin sisters, on the other hand, were angry at me for getting all the money from Uncle Gary. They wouldn't stop texting me, asking to borrow money for a new computer, clothes, or makeup. My parents even asked me to pay for both of them to go to college. I laughed so hard at their request that I snorted. Me? Pay for the two of them? After all the nightmares they put me through? That's not going to happen. I can still remember how much they teased me growing up, all because of how Mom used to dress me like a girl and wouldn't let me cut my hair short like the other boys at school. My mom would encourage them, telling them to do my hair or play dress up. If I didn't play along, they'd scream and cry, and then Dad would come stomping into whatever room we were in. I can still hear the sound of him unbuckling his belt, ready to whip it across my back. It burned like acid, but I refused to shed a tear. I wouldn't let him see how much he hurt me. I wish he would try something like that today. He wouldn't stand a chance. Ever since I inherited the money and started my chain of restaurants, my phone has been blowing up almost every single day. Friends, parents, long-lost relatives, and especially my twin sisters. They all wanted a piece of it. My sisters kept texting and calling, trying to ask me for money, and I knew I had to do something to get them to stop. They don't deserve the hard-earned money I've made. Yes, I know my Uncle Gary left me a lot of money, but listen, we spent a lot of time together, and he probably thought of me as his own son. I think of him as my dad. Aunt Lucy and Uncle Gary couldn't have children of their own, so maybe I filled a void in his heart. I sure hope so. That thought makes me smile, at least. One day, my phone rang, and when I checked, of course, it was my sister. I answered and immediately said, "No, you can't have any of my money." But she begged me to help her because she wanted to go on a trip. She just kept going on and on about money, saying if our parents had that kind of money, they'd give it to her. I told her that's because she and her twin sister are terribly spoiled. I was getting so angry that I could barely breathe. That's when I thought of something purely evil and hilarious. I told her, "You know what? How about this? I'll sign a contract that says I'll give either Lily or you $10,000. She screamed, "Yes," into the phone, but I stopped her and said, No, wait, there's more. The catch is that both of you have to buzz off all your hair and then shave your entire head so you're completely bald. Whoever gets to my restaurant on opening night first at 7 p.m. will get the money." She told me she would call Emma and ask her, then call me back. I knew they would do it because they are so desperate to take anything and everything that belongs to someone else. They always get what they want and never listen to the word no. The reason I chose to have them shave their heads is that they always have a mirror in their hands. They have to look perfect all the time, and they have to wear the most expensive designer clothing. Now, I'm gonna get them to shave off their pretty little blonde hair and be as ugly as their souls. My phone rang again, and I answered, knowing it would be them. Of course, she told me they would do it. Then she hung up. I just laughed and laughed. What they don't know is that I'm not even going to wait until the grand opening of my new restaurant, which is only 4 days away. That's when I had a great idea. I started making some phone calls to all their friends on both of my sister's Facebook pages, using Messenger. Guess what I did? I invited them all to the grand opening, even offering to pay for their drinks all night. To my surprise, 75% of them said they would be there. I told them to make sure they arrived at least 15 minutes before 7 p.m. so they could get the best seats of the night. I also told them there would be an unexpected entertainment surprise they wouldn't want to miss. I started to feel a bit guilty about what was about to happen, but then I remembered how my parents chose them over me, their firstborn son. I was left on my aunt's doorstep with just the clothes on my back and a suitcase full of girls' clothing. That was actually the best thing that could have happened to me. I finally had a family. Parents who played with me, listened to me when I talked, and answered any questions I had, no matter how strange they were. As a way of thanking my Aunt Lucy for everything she did for me, I bought her a brand new cottage home in a really nice neighborhood. She was so happy when I handed her the keys, pointed out the house, and told her it was hers. I would do it all over again just to see the smile on Aunt Lucy's face and the look of pure joy in her eyes. But today isn't about that. Today is the grand opening of my new restaurant. I made sure to call my sisters and tell them they had to be the first ones there to reach the stage where the piano is placed, which, by the way, is right in front of the entire room. Everyone inside the restaurant would have a perfect view of their shiny bald heads. They kept texting me, thanking me, and saying how glad they were that I finally saw things their way. After that, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt for the humiliation they were about to experience. They used to humiliate me when I was 6, and they were 5, putting makeup on me and bullying me at school with the other kids. Now it was my turn to return the favor. I was so excited that I could barely sleep. Today was the big day. It was time to get ready, so I got fitted for a brand new suit. I wanted to look my best on such a special occasion. After all, it's one that not many people will ever forget. With my sharp new suit ready, I headed to the restaurant. I parked around the back of the building and slipped in through the back door. I made sure there were big lights pointed directly at the stage. Any minute now, one or both of those airheads would come running through that door, frantically trying to outdo each other for the money. The clock just struck 7. It's time. When I finally came out of the kitchen, I was shocked by the turnout. There had to be at least 60 or 70 people inside, with even more outside, waiting in a line that stretched halfway down the block. I kept thinking, any minute now. I quickly pulled my phone out of my pocket to make sure I recorded the whole thing. And then, there was a commotion at the front of the restaurant near the doors. People were being shoved left and right, practically trampled. It was my twin sisters, fighting tooth and nail to get into the building and be the first on the stage. Then I caught sight of them, their shiny, pale, bald heads bobbing up and down as they raced against each other, right to the stage where I was waiting to deliver the news. Lily slammed into me like a freight train, almost knocking us both over. Then she screamed, "Yes, I won!" She yelled so loudly that everyone in the room was looking in our direction, but Lily just kept shouting while Emma was crying and saying it wasn't fair. Then I yelled, "Actually, no, you didn't win." Lily and Emma both looked at me, shocked, as if I had just performed the world's greatest magic trick. They were so confused about how I had pulled it off. "Well," I said, clearing my throat, "neither of you even came to watch me sign the contract, and you didn't sign anything yourselves, so neither of you gets anything." I just smiled in their faces, turned, and walked away. All I could hear was them screaming about their hair and the money, and I just chuckled. For once, it felt really good to be on top. Everyone was absolutely horrified by the scene unfolding in front of the stage. All you could see were flashes of bright lights from people taking pictures with their phones, but no one cared enough to stop snapping away. The next day, I checked my Facebook, and the first thing I saw was a flood of pictures of my sisters with their bald heads, crying. Yeah, I wanted revenge, and I got it. I doubt they'll ever forget this for the rest of their lives. My parents finally saw the post, and they were absolutely livid. They came to my house and practically broke down the door trying to get in and confront me about what I had done to my sisters. I simply ignored every word they said and laughed in their faces. There was no way I was going to let them make me feel guilty. I finally got the last laugh, and I still have all my money too, just to keep me company.